that Jim Crow is the reason, like the legacy of Jim Crow is the reason for disparate outcomes between racial groups, which is a little bit odd because we have certain indicators like the homicide rate in the 1950s going into the 1960s when Jim Crow was in effect being lower than the homicide rate post the Civil Rights Act. If Jim Crow were the cause of all these negative outcomes, then how come the negative outcomes appear to have no correlation with Jim Crow?
So do you think racial attitudes ended? They were fixed. They were fixed with Jim Crow. You keep asking like when these things were
I didn't say they were fixed, but if you're going to say Jim Crow laws cause a disparity and that produced all these negative outcomes, example was specifically violent crime, well, then we would...
This is hilarious. So Sean asks a good question. He says, if this specific statistic you think is caused by Jim Crow laws, okay, how come when those laws were repealed, that statistic or this crime stat or whatever he's referencing got worse, not better, or appears to not be positively correlated?
There's no correlation between them.
Jim Crow, right? Yeah. There's no correlation. Okay. And so the response is just to shout empty buzzwords. I want you to listen to this empty buzz phrase again.
I didn't say they were fixed, but if you're going to say Jim Crow laws cause a disparity and that produced all these negative outcomes, example was specifically violent.
The laws are a byproduct of a culture which produces these attitudes. What is that? How does that answer the fucking question? Doesn't answer anything. Unless they're suggesting that somehow these cultural attitudes are so ingrained in the culture that the culture becomes even more racist, even more oppressive when they remove the racism from the laws, which doesn't make any fucking sense.
That's a giant black hole.
Yeah, but that I don't think they believe that.
Right.
They're just spouting. They're just like it feels like you're playing like Fallout or Skyrim, and you're talking to an NPC, and they only have like
I know that's
like
exactly
10
what I was
responses
thinking.
Prepared for whatever you say, and there's a specific dialogue algorithm tree that they have to go down, and it's like, oh, you asked me a question, well, let me see what answer fits that the best best possible.
Let me pull up the buzzword answers.
And we would expect Jim Crow, if it caused a disparity in violent crime, to cause that disparity before it's repealed rather than after it's repealed.
These laws are a byproduct of a culture which produces this idea. People can self-racialize. People can have a conception of race that might be negative, even reinforced by society onto their own race. It's no mystery that people who are treated badly, who have an entire legacy, a generation, a history of negative treatment by people in this country, would persist in carrying on those negative attributes even when the barriers of the law are removed.
So this is what I call the racism of the gaps argument. So he said this was causing this. I disputed that because obviously Jim Crow laws, if they were causing something, would cause it when they're in effect. And then he's like, listen, out in the abstract, there's some racism that is causing this disparity.
Sean, you're not disputing what I said, so let's try this.
So this is where we...
Okay, here, I'm going to jump in here as moderator.
Thank you.
I have a question about this. I think this gets boiled down to a lot of the time.
And since I guess they're going to change the topic, just to finish that exchange, what LSP would be saying would only make... Well, first of all, I think what he said in a vacuum is true. That obviously is true.
What is that?
If a group of people are subjugated to racial treatments and bigotry for hundreds of years, obviously, even once you remove the laws, there's still going to be damage to that group of people that's going to persist, whether it be internally the culture is kind of fucked up, or whether it be externally people are still going to be racist against them to some period of time.
Well, I
think we'd all
it's similar. It's similar to the John McWhorter argument.
It is the John McWhorter argument. Yeah.
Basically, yeah. Go ahead.
And I agree with that, but it doesn't answer Sean's question. The only way it would is if the statistic maintained, if it was the same. You'd say, well, there's still some, but if it gets worse, then that opens a ballpark. Then suddenly you're like, wait a minute, something obviously else is happening here. That's not being explained.
You remember the term, the cage of norms from The Narrow Path to Liberty? Yeah, The Narrow Corridor, I think is the book. That's such a great term for this, because that is the tough thing. How do you change the social norms? They're so steadfast.
Right.
Yeah, these cultural norms are being passed down from teen to teen to teen to teen. And how do you change that? Very tough.
The time, do you believe that we should judge and treat people differently on the basis of race? if it's for a noble cause. If it is in the service of ending racism, should we judge and treat people differently on the basis of race?
I think it's a terrible idea. That's Ibram Kendi's idea. He says on page 19 of How to Be an Anti-Racist Nerd, he says on page 19, he says that the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination.
Hey, James, you have a degree in math. Isn't that mathematically correct? If two groups have been had the...
First of all, I like to commend James for knowing he's got the page down. He's like, page 19, motherfucker.
I know. That's these citations.
I know. Great.
Yeah, they're great.
Had these giant
outcomes. Wait,
no, because
hold on, no. I have a question.
No, because the person behind can see that they're behind and run faster.
James Lindsay filibuster.
If you've ever been on a track team, you don't want to be the person in the front because you don't know what's going on behind you. You want to be behind so you can catch up.
If the person behind has to run faster, isn't that unfair? They have to work harder to achieve the same outcomes.
So you do believe we should treat people differently in the service of ending racism? We should judge and treat people differently.
No, wait, hold on. You're not going to absolutely explain that. Like, in your individual life, absolutely not. However,
he advocated discrimination.
Are you having trouble? So if we have these giant, again, it's not just the deontological, the racism is bad because it's bad. It's because of the effects that it produced. So if you're saying, like, if you want to close this gap, if you believe that all men are created equal and that we should have relative parity among racial groups because they are equal, that seems like a very American concept to me, then how are you going to use a race-blind thing to get there? It doesn't mean that we have to know all the black people. No, we have to like rise you up, all the white people. We have to keep you down till everybody's even. But we can enact policies that disproportionately help black people while helping white people as well. Right? If you don't invest any sort of effort.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, I know. I'm like,
what did you just say?
I know.
All the white people, we have to keep you down till everybody's even, but we can enact policies that disproportionately.
They say can or can't?
We can enact policies that disproportionately help black people, but help white people too. I'm like,
thing to get there.
Wait a second here.
Okay, I thought he said we can't.
It doesn't mean that we have to know all the black people. No, we have to like rise you up. All the white people, we have to keep you down till.
Look, he just did the illustration. This is the mass slip moment right here. All the black people, we got to raise you up. All the white people, we got to knock you down. Did you see that?
Well, he's saying.
Did you see that?
I did, but he's saying that's not what he's advocating.
No,
for.
He is advocating for it. Watch this.
Everybody's even. It's like a very American concept to me. Then how are you going to use a race-blind thing to get there? It doesn't mean that we have to know all the black people. No, we have to like rise you up. All the white people, we have to keep you down till everybody's even. But
he says that's what we're not doing.
Maybe.
Okay.
We can enact policies that disproportionately help black people while helping.
Okay, he said can't. I thought he said can't. That's why I was so confused.
People as well.
But it's if it's disproportionately helping black people but helping white people as well, I mean, what does that exactly mean?
Well, I'll tell you what that means, and it's actually hilarious. I'm glad he said that because that is a colorblind law. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if there was to be like some sort of criminal justice reform that, helps people that were convicted of, nonviolent, crimes or drug crimes or something, then that would help. The majority of people that would help would be white people because white people make up the majority of the population, including the majority of the prison population. However, that would disproportionately help black people because there are a disproportionate amount of black people in jail. Okay. So it's bizarre that Jangles just said that because he's literally giving the argument against CRT. We talked about this with George Floyd, and we talked about this with Kyle Rittenhouse, and saying Black Lives Matter is stupid because they're making it a race issue as opposed to making it a policing issue, and just saying we need police reform.
Correct.
Because that would help everyone, even if it would help black people disproportionately.
Yeah. So even with the Kyle Rittenhouse situation, if we want to talk about
prosecutorial misconduct,
overreach,
yes. Right? Exactly.
All of a sudden, you're getting a bunch of federal laws about prosecutorial overreach, and you're doing good for both communities.
Right, and so that's why it's so bizarre that Jangles said this because he's literally making the argument that's against CRT. Yes.
Yeah.
While claiming this is a CRT argument.
CRT coming out and making these racialized laws is just a big fucking mess.
Right.
And that's why people like Sitch and I get so upset about this stuff, is because it feels like it's just running in the opposite direction. It feels like all the work that I've seen accomplished in my lifetime, it seems like it's flushing that down the toilet.
Right. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it's doing.
Yeah.